inbox at 4:17 p.m. on a Friday. Corporate cowards love that time slot, gives them a clean escape to their BMW while you're sitting there processing what just happened. Subject re. Annual compensation review final decision. I didn't open it right away. Let it sit there like a ticking bomb while I finished reviewing a compliance report for our biggest client. Took a sip of my coffee black, no sugar, same as I've been drinking since my Air Force days. Around me, the open floor plan of Steel Grid Financial Solutions buzzed with the usual Friday energy, sales bros celebrating deals they probably structured wrong. Marketing kids filming some social media nonsense about disrupting traditional banking. I'm Garrison Wade, 47 years old, senior contracts and regulatory analyst. That means I'm the guy who reads the 500-page documents these hotshots sign without looking. I keep us from accidentally violating federal banking regulations that could shut this place down overnight. Finally, click the email. Garrison, appreciate your patience on the compensation adjustment. Your performance metrics remain exemplary. However, due to current budget reallocations and pending regulatory review cycles, your salary adjustment request has been lost in legal review. We'll revisit this next quarter. Best, Todd Barrett, HR Director. Lost in legal review, 4th year running. 3 years back, it was market uncertainty. 2 years ago, restructuring priorities. Last year, compliance budget constraints. Now this bureaucratic masterpiece. Meanwhile, I knew for a fact they'd just approved a $20,000 retention bonus for some 28-year-old developer who'd crashed our testing server twice last month. I processed his paperwork myself. I adjusted my watch band. Vintage Omega Speedmaster. Gift to myself after 12 years in the Air Force. Felt something shift in my head. Not anger exactly. More like when you're troubleshooting a system and suddenly see the real problem hiding behind all the obvious symptoms. These people thought I was office furniture, a reliable piece of equipment you use daily but never really notice. They figured because I didn't play foosball or wear startup t-shirts that I had no tactical advantage. They miscalculated. I looked across the office at the sales team. They were popping champagne over the mid-state banking deal, an $80 million contract that made Steel Grid's quarterly numbers. It was our crown jewel, the deal that funded our CEO's new Tesla and the fancy espresso machine in the break room. It was also a contract I'd written. Not the PowerPoint presentation, not the handshake. I drafted the master service agreement, the regulatory compliance addenda, the 73-page attachment covering federal banking oversight requirements. I remembered that attachment clearly, written 6 years ago when we were desperate for cash flow. Mid-state wanted performance guarantees we couldn't afford up front, so I'd crafted a complex royalty trigger buried in Banking Clause 9D. It was elegant engineering, invisible to casual inspection, but deadly precise in its operational parameters. Standard Air Force doctrine. Prepare for contingencies your commanding officers can't imagine. I stood up, knees creaking slightly, too many years jumping out of transport planes. Walked past the foosball table where 2 account executives were arguing about some deal. Hey, Garrison. One called out, "Smile, man, it's Friday." I gave him the kind of smile a flight instructor gives a cadet who just bounced his landing. Have a good weekend, Jason. Made my way to the secure compliance room. Most documents were digital now, but original banking contracts with wet signatures stayed in the fireproof vault. I had the access codes naturally. I was the only one who ever used the system. The room hummed with white noise from the air filtration system, mechanical precision. No chaos, no startup energy, just properly functioning equipment. Spun the combination lock. 15 to 22-7. My old service number digits. Pulled out the thick navy binder labeled Mid-State Banking Consortium Executed Master Agreement. Heavy as a technical manual. Substantial. Flip to page 58. Banking Clause 9D times New Roman 10-point font. Small. Unassuming. Lethal as a pressure plate on an IED. In the event that licensed system achieves 99.97% uptime for 4 consecutive quarters while processing aggregate transaction volume exceeding 8.2 billion per quarter, licensor acknowledges that intellectual property rights for core algorithms shift to shared royalty structure entitling original IP architect to retroactive commission of 0.4% of gross contract value, unless waiver is executed by said architect. Signature page showed CEO signatures from both companies, and at the bottom in my careful engineer's handwriting, IP Architect Compliance Officer, Garrison Wade. I closed the binder. The silence in that room carried weight, potential energy, like a spring under compression, waiting for release. Lost in legal review. The operational irony was perfect. Spent the weekend at home, which operates on completely different protocols than Steel Grid's chaos. Quiet, organized, no foosball table, just my workshop where I restore vintage timepieces and a bourbon collection that actually impresses people who understand quality craftsmanship. Had the contract documentation. Now I needed the performance data. Logged into our admin portal Sunday evening. My access level was comprehensive, not because I'm some hacker, but because 7 years ago our CTO got tired of manually approving my audit requests and gave me root access to the data warehouse. Probably forgot he did it. People forget a lot of details about support systems until they fail catastrophically. Pulled the uptime reports for the last 18 months. Q2 2023, 99.98%. Q3 2023, 99.9%. Q4 2023, 99.97%. Q4 2024, 99.98%. 4 consecutive quarters above the threshold. Military precision and civilian systems. Transaction volume data, 9.1 billion, 12.3 billion, 8.9 billion, 10.7 billion, all well above the 8.2 billion trigger point. I leaned back in my chair, blue light from the monitor reflecting off my reading glasses. The calculations were simple. The tactical implications weren't. 0.4% of $80 million over 5 years. Base calculation, $320,000, add penalties for failure to notify, compound interest for delayed payment, regulatory violation fines. Conservative estimate, $500,000 minimum, but this wasn't about money. This was about operational parameters. I'd written Banking Clause 9D as a failsafe when we were a struggling startup. Protection against hostile acquisition. Current executive team, most hired after I engineered this contract, had never bothered reviewing legacy compliance protocols. They treated the mid-state deal like a cash dispensing unit, completely unaware they'd been operating without proper authorization codes. Classic command failure. Ignore your logistics specialist until the supply lines collapse. Printed every performance report. Built a documentation fortress. Paper trail thicker than a technical order manual. Sunday evening, I sat on my back deck with 2 fingers of maker's mark. Watched the Arizona sunset paint the desert hills copper and gold. Like the view from a C-13 over Afghanistan, but without the incoming fire. Thought about Todd in HR and his lost in legal review message. Corporate speak for we don't respect you enough to tell the truth. Took out my phone. Didn't call a lawyer yet. Called someone who'd appreciate the operational irony as much as I did. Douglas Mitchell answered on the 3rd ring. He was general counsel for Midstate Banking, a guy who'd spent 20 years negotiating deals for financial institutions. Sharp operator. The kind of lawyer who actually read technical specifications instead of skimming executive summaries. Garrison. His voice carried that authority of someone who'd been in too many war rooms. Sunday evening. Either your systems are down or someone's about to have a very bad Monday. Neither. Doug, just conducting routine maintenance checks. Been reviewing our master agreement from 6 years back, specifically the performance metrics section. Long pause, could hear him shifting in his home office chair. Mechanical sounds of a professional adjusting position for serious business. Banking Clause 9D, he asked. He remembered. Course he did. Good lawyers catalog every pressure point in their agreements. Performance thresholds were exceeded 18 months ago, I said. No notification was sent regarding royalty activation. Another pause, longer this time. When you've been in enough briefing rooms, you learn to read silence. Garrison, they haven't processed the IP architect compensation, negative. In fact, just received denial for basic cost of living adjustment. Doug's laugh was dry as desert wind. That constitutes a compliance violation. Under federal banking oversight, if SteelGrid is operating our systems with unresolved IP compensation issues, they're technically in breach of licensing protocols, which compromises regulatory standing. I confirmed. Exactly. Garrison, I need to flag this immediately with our compliance team. We could be looking at examiner scrutiny if this isn't resolved. I swirled the bourbon, watching the amber liquid catch the last light. Thought you should have advance notice before I file anything formal. Monday morning, Brennan's Steakhouse on 5th. Noon sharp. Roger that. Doug hung up. My hands were steady. Training kicked in during crisis situations. Always had. Monday arrived with typical Arizona clarity. No clouds, no ambiguity, just hard desert light cutting through everything. The restaurant was old school establishment. Dark wood, serious business atmosphere. Place where handshake deals used to mean something before lawyers took over everything. Doug was already positioned at a corner table, martini untouched in front of him. He looked like Central Casting's idea of a bank counsel, silver hair, expensive suit, eyes that calculated risk percentages automatically. Didn't stand when I arrived, just nodded at the empty chair, like we were starting a mission briefing. Coffee, black, I told the waiter, who materialized from somewhere. Doug cut straight to tactical assessment, Had my team review the clause structure overnight. You're correct on all counts. It's ironclad. Also professionally crafted. Who authorized that language during negotiations? Previous CEO, he was desperate to close the deal. Told me to add whatever safeguards I considered necessary to protect IP valuation. He assumed it protected the company from mid-state. Didn't realize it protected the architect from the company. Doug tapped his fingers on the white tablecloth. Steady rhythm like a metronome counting down to detonation. Here's our tactical situation. Mid-state pays SteelGrid $16 million annually. We depend on your software for core banking operations. If SteelGrid is in breach of IP compensation protocols, that creates liability exposure for us. If you pursue legal action and obtain an injunction, you could theoretically freeze our access to licensed systems. Not my objective, Doug. I engineered the compliance framework, just want the contract terms honored, and you want them to understand that lost in legal review isn't an acceptable accounting methodology. I nodded, professional recognition of shared understanding. Doug pulled a folder from his briefcase. This isn't legal advice, but Midstate takes federal compliance seriously. If we discover a key vendor failing to satisfy banking oversight requirements, we're mandated to report it. That triggers examiner involvement. The folder contained a draft letter to SteelGrid's CEO. Subject line, urgent, federal compliance review, IP compensation protocols. It demanded proof that Banking Clause 9D had been satisfied and cited the exact performance metrics I documented. If we transmit this, Doug said, there's no abort sequence. Banking examiners don't negotiate. Execute the mission, I said. We didn't shake hands, didn't need ceremony. Just two professionals who understood how systems operated under pressure. Tuesday morning, 9:03 a.m. I sat at my workstation reviewing routine compliance reports when I monitored the email hitting our executive server, high priority classification. Routed directly to CEO Braxton Cole, CFO Chad Morrison, and General Counsel Gary Hoffman, 9:18 a.m. Braxton forwarded it to Gary. Handle this. Probably routine compliance noise. Don't let it interfere with Q4 objectives. 9:34 a.m. Gary forwarded it to Chad. They're asking about royalty structures. Do we maintain any of those? Send standard financial disclosures. 9:51 a.m. The message landed in my inbox. From Gary, Mid-State Compliance Inquiry. Garrison, they transmitted some formal request about Banking Clause 9D. Sounds like legacy contract terminology. Draft a standard we are in compliance response. Don't allocate too much time, need you focused on merger due diligence. I stared at my monitor. Had to adjust my watch band to maintain operational composure. They hadn't read it. Hadn't opened the attachment where Doug explicitly listed the performance milestones. They saw Banking Clause 9D, didn't recognize the terminology, and dumped it on the one person who knew exactly what ordinance they were handling. They were asking the demolitions expert to investigate why the explosive storage was making noise. Replied to Gary, I'll research the specific language requirements. Need to cross-reference with historical performance logs. Might take several days for complete analysis. Gary shot back instantly. Take whatever time necessary. The compliance letter demanded response within 72 hours. That deadline would expire Friday morning. If missed, Mid-State reserved the right to suspend payments pending federal examiner review. I opened a new encrypted folder, Project Accountability. Dragged in the HR denial email, Gary's message asking me to handle the audit about my own unpaid compensation. Screen captures of executive expense reports showing $30,000 in business dinners that were actually golf weekends in Scottsdale. Always document everything. First rule of military intelligence. Wednesday's executive team meeting was tactically fascinating. Sat in the conference room listening to Braxton present slides about unprecedented uptime performance and record transaction volumes. The exact metrics that triggered my royalty clause. He might as well have been briefing on mission success while ignoring the after-action report. We are absolutely dominating. Braxton announced, literally fist-pumping like a college quarterback. Mid-State couldn't be more satisfied with our operational performance. Gary was scrolling through Instagram under the table. He'd completely forgotten about the compliance letter. Command failure in real time. Thursday arrived and departed. I didn't transmit the response. Didn't draft the we are in compliance letter Gary expected. Just updated the ticket in our internal system. Status, pending executive review. Awaiting authorization for release. Technically accurate. I was waiting for them to execute their responsibilities. Friday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. The 72-hour deadline expired. 9:02 a.m. My phone buzzed. Text from Doug, radio silence. Interesting tactical choice. They delegated response authority to me, I replied. Still conducting analysis. Doug sent back a chess piece emoji. The game was in motion. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. Monthly ritual where Braxton stood in our main conference room delivering motivational speeches about changing the financial services landscape. Room was packed. Developers, sales team, marketing personnel, everyone holding coffee cups and looking like they'd rather be debugging code. Braxton was up front wearing his signature uniform, startup t-shirt under a $3,000 blazer. Q4 is looking absolutely incredible, he announced through the wireless mic. Midstate is expanding our partnership. We're projecting 25% growth trajectory across all metrics. I positioned myself against the back wall, checking my Omega. 10:33 a.m. The main doors opened, not a late employee. 3 men in dark federal suits walked in, behind them Doug Mitchell in his trademark Navy pinstripe. The room went silent, like someone had cut the power to the PA system. Braxton squinted against the presentation lights. "Gentlemen, can I help you?" The lead federal examiner walked straight to the front. His voice didn't need amplification. "Braxton Cole, Chief Executive Officer of SteelGrid Financial Solutions." "Yeah, who's asking?" The examiner handed Braxton a thick document bound in official seals. "Federal Banking Compliance Investigation. You're being served with an administrative subpoena for breach of vendor licensing requirements and failure to satisfy IP compensation protocols under CFR Title 12, Section 563.1180. Dead silence, could hear the HVAC system cycling. "What is this?" Braxton's voice cracked like a cadet on his first solo flight. "This is some kind of mistake." Doug stepped forward. "No mistake. Midstate Banking submitted a formal compliance report Tuesday. You failed to respond to our audit request regarding Banking Clause 9D, per federal oversight requirements, that triggers mandatory examiner review." "Banking Clause what?" Chad pushed forward from the side like he was storming a position. "We don't owe anyone royalties. This is a software company, not a music label." Actually, the examiner said, consulting his tablet, your senior contracts, and regulatory analyst documented specific IP compensation triggers tied to performance metrics. Metrics you've been publicly reporting as achieved for over 18 months. Every head in the room turned. 200 pairs of eyes followed the examiner's gaze to where I stood by the exit. I didn't retreat, didn't look down, walked forward through the crowd, like advancing through hostile territory with complete mission confidence. "Banking Clause 9D, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. Performance-based royalty trigger. B 4% of gross contract value upon achieving specified uptime and volume thresholds." Braxton stared at me like I'd just announced the building was rigged with explosives. "Garrison, what is this?" I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket. "My attorney's letter of representation and whistleblower protection notice. I believe my compensation review just got located in legal." Handed the letter to Gary, whose hands started shaking as he read the law firm letterhead. "Conference room," I suggested to the examiner. "I have all the relevant documentation prepared for review." 10 minutes later, we occupied SteelGrid's main boardroom, me and Doug on one side, Braxton, Chad, and Gary on the other. Federal examiner taking notes at the head of the table like a court reporter. Braxton looked like he was experiencing altitude sickness. "Garrison, we can resolve this. Retroactive compensation adjustment, 15%, 20%. I maintain neutral expression. "We're beyond salary adjustments, Braxton. We're discussing Banking Clause 9D, federal compliance protocols. Do you understand the operational implications?" Chad's face was bright red. "This is sabotage. You deliberately concealed this from us." I transmitted Gary an email Tuesday explaining the compliance requirements. He instructed me to handle it. I handled it according to federal regulations. Gary opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew I had the complete communication record, knew I had documented everything. The examiner leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, SteelGrid owes Mr. Wade approximately $480,000 in performance royalties plus penalties for failure to notify. Additionally, operating financial systems while in breach of IP compensation requirements violates CFR 12563. That carries potential corporate sanctions and individual officer liability. $500,000. Braxton whispered like he'd just been told the casualty count. I slid a term sheet across the table, had my attorney draft it over the weekend using standard military contract specifications. Payment of all back royalties with interest, $483,000. Formal acknowledgement of administrative oversight. Reinstatement of royalty clause with updated notification requirements. My legal fees covered in full, and a promotion to VP regulatory compliance reporting directly to the board. Chad stared at the paper like it was a live grenade. "This is extortion." "Negative," I said quietly. "This is the cost of calling an Air Force veteran's attention to detail nitpicking for 4 consecutive years." The examiner cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, I should mention that failure to resolve this creates ongoing compliance violations. We'd be required to flag this in our next regulatory review of mid-state banking operations. Braxton slumped in his chair. For the first time in the 8 years I'd worked there, he actually looked at me, not the quiet guy in the corner office who fixed contract formatting. The man holding his company's operational future, agreed, he said. We'll execute the settlement. Doug clicked his pen. I have the agreement documentation prepared. The wire transfer hit my account Wednesday afternoon. $483,247.80 looked like coordinates for a GPS target. Felt like mission accomplished. But the real tactical victory was watching the organizational restructuring over the following weeks. Braxton transitioned to strategic advisory role to focus on long-term vision development. Translation: the board heard about nearly losing our primary client and relieved him of command. Chad decided to pursue new opportunities after my first audit of his expense reports revealed some creative interpretations of business development costs. His departure was swift and permanent. Gary maintained his position but transformed into a ghost operator. Spent his days actually reading contract documentation now, door closed, frantically searching for other buried ordnance that might detonate. As for my situation, I got the corner office with windows facing the mountains, replaced the disrupt everything motivational posters with my Air Force commendation certificates, and a photo of my old squadron. My new designation: VP Regulatory Compliance and Risk Management. Hired Kevin Torres as my senior analyst. Promoted him from junior status where he'd been underutilized. First operational directive: we read everything. Second directive: we flag everything. Third directive: never ignore a red indicator in any compliance matrix. The organizational culture shifted like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Sales personnel learned to request meetings before entering my office. They discovered that Garrison needs to sign off meant having documentation squared away or facing immediate mission abort. Doug and I maintained monthly tactical briefings over lunch. Don't discuss much business anymore. Mostly bourbon varieties and the fascinating ways people engineer their own operational failures. 6 months later, received an email from Todd in HR subject: annual performance review, executive level compensation. Garrison, your compensation package has been processed and approved by the board of directors. Substantial increase reflects your expanded operational responsibilities. No administrative delays this time. Best regards, Todd Barrett. I reviewed the message twice. Took a sip of my coffee, still black, still simple, but now the premium single origin blend the company stocks in the executive break room. Hit reply: appreciate the operational efficiency, Todd. Ensure it's filed correctly. Wouldn't want anything getting lost in legal review again. Closed my laptop. The sunset through my office windows painted the desert hills amber and gold, like the view from a successful extraction flight. Heading home with mission objectives accomplished. They say the devil is in the details. They're incorrect. The devil is in the person who actually reads the details, understands the tactical implications, and knows when to execute the plan. That person just got promoted to VP level. But here's what this really comes down to, and I want you to think about this carefully. Every single one of us has been in that position, where some corporate hotshot half your age thinks your experience doesn't matter, where they treat your professional expertise like it's disposable furniture. You've sat in those meetings watching 28-year-old MBA graduates make decisions about systems they don't understand, probably nodding along because you need the paycheck. The difference between getting steamrolled and getting respected isn't luck, it's preparation. It's reading every single document they're too lazy to review. It's understanding the systems they take for granted. It's building your knowledge base like you're preparing for combat, because in the corporate world, that's exactly what you're doing. You don't have to accept being invisible. You don't have to smile and nod when some kid in a $3,000 blazer tells you your raise got lost in legal review for the 4th year running. But if you're going to push back, you better make sure you're holding the right cards, and you better make sure you know exactly how to play them. Your expertise has value, your experience matters, and sometimes the best revenge is simply showing them exactly how much they need what they thought they could take for granted.